Prime Minister Netanyahu joins us live this morning from Israel via satellite. Mr. Prime Minister, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, excellent, excellent. I'm glad you can hear me, but I want to make sure that you can hear us, the delegates attending AIPAC's largest policy conference ever. As you might have heard, the theme of our conference is Come Together, and it's not just a tagline. The people in this room come from many different backgrounds and many walks of life, but there's one thing we all share: a profound love and unwavering commitment to the one and only Jewish state of Israel. Together, we are determined to ensure Israel has the means to defend herself by herself. We are determined to ensure that Iran is held accountable for its dangerous behavior. We are determined to stand with the people of Israel in their enduring quest for peace. And we will not rest in our efforts to strengthen the unbreakable bond between the United States and Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu.
Good morning, America. Good morning, AIPAC. And a special good morning to the 4,000 students who are cutting class today to be with AIPAC in Washington. Greetings to all of you from Jerusalem. I want to first send my condolences to the families of those murdered in today's terrorist attacks in Brussels. The chain of attacks from Paris to San Bernardino, to Istanbul, to the Ivory Coast, and now to Brussels, and the daily attacks in Israel. This is one continuous assault on all of us. In all these cases, the terrorists have no resolvable grievances. It's not as if we could offer them Brussels or Istanbul or California or even the West Bank. That won't satisfy their grievances, because what they seek is our utter destruction and their total domination. Their basic demand is that we should simply disappear. Well, my friends, that's not going to happen. The only way to defeat these terrorists is to join together and fight them together. That's how we'll defeat terrorism. With political unity and with moral clarity. I think we have that in abundance. And I want to thank today the leadership of AIPAC and each and every one of you. I thank you for the tremendous support you've provided Israel over so many years. I thank you for the clear and unequivocal stand you took last year during the nuclear Iran deal debate, a debate critical for Israel's security. And that debate, though intense, did not undermine the unbreakable alliance between Israel and the United States. As part of that great alliance, America has generously provided Israel with many of the tools we need to defend ourselves. We're now working on a new agreement to help bolster Israel's security in the years to come. I hope we can conclude that agreement soon. And I take this opportunity once again to thank President Obama for his support, including for ballistic missile defense. Israel deeply appreciates it, and we also deeply appreciate the strong bipartisan support for Israel in Congress and the strong, overwhelming support for Israel among the American people. Year after year, the overwhelming majority of Americans stand with Israel. They know something profound that stands out for all to see today. They know that Israel is an island of liberty and democracy and stability in the sea of despotism and violence and instability that surrounds us. And that is why I believe that Israel must never be an issue that divides Americans, but a great cause of liberty that unites Americans. My friends, 2 weeks ago, I visited Yodfat in northern Israel. It was there 2,000 years ago that the Romans began their military campaign against the Jews. I'm holding in my hand right now an exact replica of an arrow found at Yodfat, one of thousands used by the Romans in their war to crush Jewish independence. Yet 2 millennia later, the Jewish people are once again free and sovereign in our ancient homeland. And in rebuilding our land, our state, our economy, our army, our science, our culture, we've achieved remarkable successes. But it's true we also face great challenges. We are, in fact, today witnessing two contradictory trends. First, the positive trend. Every day, high-level delegations land at Ben Gurion Airport. They come from America, they come from Europe. Increasingly, they come from Asia, from Africa, from Latin America. As many of them confront the rise of militant Islam and its accompanying terrorism, they come to Israel to strengthen their security. They wish to learn from Israel's proven security and intelligence capabilities how to better protect their own people. But they also come to Israel because they want to upgrade their economies with Israel's technology. And for good reason. Israel's know-how is powering the world's computers, navigating its cars, protecting its bank accounts. It's led to breakthroughs in treating multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. It helps farmers around the world yield more crops, produce more work, more milk, conserve more water. So for all these reasons, the world is coming to Israel. Today we have diplomatic relations with 161 countries, more than at any time in our history. And by the way, there are not that many countries left. There are only about 200 countries in the world. But alongside this positive trend, there's a second negative trend. While Israel is embraced by a growing number of individual nations, there are those who seek to malign Israel among the nations, and especially in the United Nations. At the UN, Israel, the Middle East's only true democracy, is slandered like no other country on earth. At the UN, Israel is subjected to consistent, systematic discrimination. Only Israel is permanently scheduled for condemnation at the UN Human Rights Council. Not Iran, not Syria, not North Korea. Only Israel is hounded by UN bodies expressly established to delegitimize its very existence. Only Israel is condemned every year by 20 hostile resolutions in the UN General Assembly. The UN, my friends, has a shameful record of singling out Israel for castigation and condemnation. So I have a question for you. Why would anyone think that the UN could decide on a fair and secure peace for Israel? Yet amazingly, there are some who believe exactly that. They seek to impose terms on Israel in the UN Security Council. And those terms would undoubtedly be stacked against us. They always are. So such an effort in the UN would only convince the Palestinians that they can stab their way to a state. Mind you, not a state next to Israel, but a state instead of Israel. A Security Council resolution to pressure Israel would further harden Palestinian positions, and thereby it could actually kill the chances of peace for many, many years. And that is why I hope the United States will maintain its long-standing position to reject such a UN resolution. I was glad to hear the presidential candidates from both parties reaffirm this basic principle. Peace won't come through UN Security Council resolutions, but through direct negotiations between the parties. The best formula for achieving peace remains two states for two peoples, in which a demilitarized Palestinian state finally recognizes the Jewish state. Now, I know there's some skepticism about my views on this. So let me state unequivocally, and here's the acid test. I'm ready to begin such negotiations immediately, without preconditions, anytime, anywhere. That's a fact. But President Abbas is not ready to do so. That's also a fact. There's political will here in Jerusalem. There's no political will there in Ramallah. For the last 5.5 years, President Abbas has refused to sit down and talk with me even for a minute. But that doesn't mean he's been silent. He's helped inculcate a new generation of young Palestinians with murderous hatred for Israel. And my friends, this incitement has deadly consequences. Palestinian children are taught to stab Jews. They're taught that the goal of the Palestinian people is not to establish a state on the West Bank, but in all of Israel, in Akko, Haifa, Nazareth, Jaffa. Now, what I'm about to show you is deeply disturbing. I think you have to see for yourselves what the Palestinians are teaching their children. I want you to see the daily pledge of allegiance of Palestinian children. Take a look.
I am the Palestinian child. My toys are the rock and the rifle.
My friend, do you know what the 48 lands are?
Haifa, Jaffa, Acre.
Correct, and Nazareth, and many more cities in these lands. The 48 lands are all ours and will return to us, right?
The official Palestinian Authority schools, the media, and mosques preach to kill Israelis just because they're Jews. And children emulate the murderous videos online.
Take along a rock and knife.
This incitement comes directly from the Palestinian leadership.
We welcome every drop of blood spilled in Jerusalem.
The result of this incitement is hundreds of terror attacks in the past few months. Dozens of Israelis were murdered in those terror attacks. About half of the terrorists are under the age of 18. This incitement fuels terror and prevents peace.
ايش بتقولي لشباب الضفة؟
This is sick. It's inexcusable. That my friends, that little girl wasn't born hating. She was taught to hate, as were the Palestinians who murdered the American student Taylor Force and other American citizens in recent months. You've already heard what an impressive young man Taylor was. But President Abbas's Fatah movement praised Taylor's killer as, and I quote this, as a hero and a martyr. Now, that's not coming from Hamas. That's coming from Abbas. And now the Palestinians will spur even more terrorism by rewarding the families of murderers, including those who murdered Americans, with a regular monthly payment. So the message they send to Palestinians is clear. Terrorism pays, literally. If the international community really wants to advance peace, it must demand that the Palestinians stop poisoning the minds of their children. If the international community wants to advance peace, it must address the true core of the conflict, the persistent Palestinian refusal to accept a Jewish state in any borders. So there's bad news, but there's also some good news. While the Palestinians are stuck in their refusal to make peace, others are moving forward. First, Israel's peace agreements with Egypt and Jordan have weathered many storms. Second, increasingly, our other neighbors, recognize that we have common interests. They understand that we face the same threats from Iran and from ISIS. Now, I can tell you from a perspective of my lifetime, this is a historic change. I believe it offers a unique opportunity to advance peace. And we are working every day to seize that opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm confident that over time, the trend of embracing Israel will overcome the trend of maligning Israel. Because ultimately, freedom beats tyranny. And ultimately, when vigorously defended, truth beats lies. So I believe that Israel faces a future of promise. I believe that when we stand together, all of us, we can overcome all the challenges facing us. And of these challenges, none is greater than Iran's unrelenting aggressions. Iran remains fully committed to genocide, our genocide. Its leaders loudly, openly, even proudly, they say and proclaim that their goal is to destroy Israel. Iran sends deadly weapons to Hezbollah in Lebanon against us. It bankrolls Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza against us. It seeks to open a new terror front on the Golan against us. And it offers thousands of dollars for each Palestinian terror attacks against us. So here's what I believe. I believe that both those who supported the nuclear deal and those who opposed it can at the very least work together to stop Iran's aggression and terror and hold Iran accountable for its transgressions. Since the nuclear deal, Iran has continued to conduct ballistic missile tests in defiance of its international obligations. As you've heard, Iran recently fired a ballistic missile with a Hebrew inscription painted on it. It said, "Israel must be wiped out." So, ladies and gentlemen, the writing is not on the wall. It's on the missile. Now, my friends, an arrow just like this was shot by a Roman soldier at Yotfat. He was fighting to end Jewish independence once and for all. But Imperial Rome is long gone. And I am speaking to you today from our capital, Jerusalem, as the Prime Minister of the reborn Jewish state. We have restored our independence. We have restored our capacity to defend ourselves. Iran should learn this history, and it should have no illusions. Israel will defend itself mightily against all those who seek to destroy us. And Iran should remember that today, it's not only the enemies of the Jewish people who have arrows. Today, the Jewish state can defend itself with powerful arrows of our own. Take a look. The Arrow missile defense system is the product of Americans and Israelis working together. So I want to say again to all of you, thank you, America. Thank you, AIPAC. Thank you for helping secure our common future, and a happy Purim to all of you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Robert Melendez.
Good morning. Our thoughts are with the people of Belgium today, following explosions at its main international airport and a subway station in the heart of the city. And though the full toll is still preliminary and the cause of the blasts still not clear, dozens have been killed, and authorities are predicting that this number will rise. This comes on the heels of the arrest of Europe's most wanted man. And if this is an echo of the November 13th Paris attacks, it is yet another reminder that the United States must stand by its friends and allies, whether in the Middle East or Europe or elsewhere. We're going to certainly be closely watching as this story develops, but our hopes and prayers and thoughts are with the people in Belgium. Let me thank Howard Korer, your president, and AIPAC's leaders and members, especially the New Jersey delegation. I understand 1,400 strong this year. To my good friend Lonnie Kaplan and all of you here from every state, welcome to Washington. I know it has been a long convention and you have listened to many speeches, but not as many as inspiring as the remarks we just heard from Prime Minister Netanyahu. In the many years in Washington that I have had the honor to speak at AIPAC, I've learned one thing. You never want to follow Bibi Netanyahu at the podium. So Howard and Lonnie, thank you for scheduling me to speak after one of the world's most quotable leaders. I especially remember Prime Minister Netanyahu's famously capturing the essence of the Netanyahu defense doctrine when he said, if the Arabs put their weapons down today, there would be no more violence. If the Jews put down their weapons today, there would be no more Israel. Let's keep that quote in mind as you go to the office of senators and congressmen where the real work begins, strengthening U.S.-Israel relations and protecting Israel and the Israeli people for generations to come. You leave this convention hall today armed with many ideas from many speakers and from the Prime Minister about what the future holds for a region that is a tinderbox of the world. For both the United States and Israel, getting it wrong is not an option. Getting it right means recognizing the real threats that Israel faces from its neighbors and from an increasingly emboldened Iran. It means redoubling our efforts to keep Israel secure, safe, and powerful in the face of those threats. And we see the headlines every day. In them, we can see the balance of power in the region shifting, and we realize the daunting task ahead. Last week, Syrian Kurds declared a federal region, stopping short of independence, but clearly signifying the beginning of decentralization in Syria. We saw the ravages of a car bomb in Ankara that killed at least 35, carried out by a terrorist splinter group of the PKK, known as the Kurdish Freedom Falcons. We've seen the rise of one terrorist group after another across North Africa, Libya, all the way to Afghanistan and Pakistan, claiming loyalty to the Islamic State and further destabilizing the region. And every day we see more images of the largest mass migration to Europe since World War II. A child washing up on a beach in the Mediterranean, and millions more fleeing the violence and living in refugee camps trying to find a place to call home. Clearly, the region is in turmoil, the balance of power rapidly shifting, the integrity of national borders in question. ISIS is increasing influence from the Maghreb to the Hindu Kush, and Iran, enriched and emboldened, in my view, with the implementation of the JPOA, is test-launching missiles that could reach Israel, and Israel's security is at stake. We see headlines that Iran has launched and test-fired 2 ballistic missiles capable of reaching Tel Aviv, some of them marked, "Israel must be wiped out." Now, some of us saw it coming. Everyone in this room could see it coming. But we signed the JPOA, and surprise, surprise, Iran is already testing the agreement, testing our resolve, and quite literally testing long-range ballistic missiles. At the end of the day, even proponents of the agreement have to acknowledge that the JPOA provides Iran with a $100 billion windfall of new capital to increase its conventional forces, fortify its proxies, further destabilize the region, and find a backdoor method of accelerating the time frame for which it could break out and build a nuclear weapon. Now, let me say, as emphatically as I can, we will never let that happen. We can never let that happen. We can never allow Iran to threaten Israel or the region with a nuclear weapon. Never. And I will continue to stand with you against any nation, any power, any potential threat to Israel's right to exist, no matter what it takes, no matter what political powers I have to take on, even if they are in my own party. Now, as far as I'm concerned, as far as all of us are concerned, there will never, never be daylight between the United States and Israel, period. The strength of that U.S.-Israel relationship is clear, and we will make it clear in our commitment to negotiate a new, enhanced 10-year, $3.1 billion defense aid package for Israel. And it is my hope, and I believe the hope of many in Congress, that we will fully fund all 3 U.S.-Israel cooperative missile defense programs in the fiscal year 2017 budget, and a separate request for Iron Dome. America and Israel's security is our fundamental goal, and the robust defense of the Israeli people is our mission. In a chaotic region, in chaotic times, they are a reflection of our democracy and our values. While too many other nations offer little in the way of progress, Israel and Israeli democracy has always offered educational opportunity, economic stability, social justice, and the hope of modernity in the face of those who would turn back the clock to another century. Israel represents the promise of progress amidst the ravages of despair and fear and human suffering and the displacement of millions that are altering the map of the Middle East and changing the demographics of the region. And sometimes, I must say, when I look at the vitriol stemming from certain quarters from within our own politics here in the United States, I am reminded why being pro-Israel has always meant following our better angels, angels of religious tolerance and the rule of law, welcoming rather than refusing refugees, of embracing differences and diversity, and of solving problems with entrepreneurial innovation and advancement rather than blaming the other across the border or on the other side of the world. The fact is, in the Middle East, we stand at the confluence of order and chaos, civility and barbarism, of a region flirting with the kind of nihilism that is threatening to leave a generation with no hope for the future. A generation of young men and young women seemingly determined to have no future, willing to strap a bomb to their bodies in the name of Allah. We cannot tolerate, as civilized nations, nihilists who use children as a weapon and a flawed interpretation of the Quran as a shield. And we cannot allow the mullahs in Iran who threaten Israel with the pursuit of their nuclear ambition to ignite an arms race in the Middle East that will only make the situation worse. And what we cannot do is let down, let up, or give in to the forces aligned against Israel. Let's talk about the JPOA and what we can do to close the space that may allow Iran to pursue its regional adventurism. The agreement, in my view, did not go far enough. It provided too much to Iran and too little to enhance Israel's security and the security of the United States. And when I cast my vote in the Senate against the agreement, I said then that the agreement abandons our long-held policy of preventing nuclear proliferation, that it embarked not on preventing it, but on managing or controlling it. I said that JPOA did not require Iran to dismantle its illicit nuclear infrastructure. It was not rollback for rollback as we had hoped. Instead, we're rolling back sanctions, and Iran is only limiting its capability, but not dismantling it and continuing its adventurism. What did we get from the deal? Ultimately, we got an alarm bell should Iran decide to violate their commitments, and a system for inspections to verify their compliance through the International Atomic Energy Administration, which we learned from a General Accounting Office report issued at my request, along with Senator Kirk, that the IAEA has its own challenges and limitations. We learned from that report that it will require $10 million a year for 15 years, above and beyond its present budget, to monitor, verify, and meet the requirements of the JPOA, that the IAEA is short of human capital and equipment necessary to do the job, and that its attention will be lost on other proliferation challenges. The fact is, the IAEA is not an intelligence agency. It's not schooled in tradecraft or detecting clandestine or undeclared activities. So what does it say? That we are putting our national security interests in the hands of a multilateral organization that at best will be struggling to meet its requirements. Now, we're only a short time into this process, and already I know that we need new legislation to fill the space around the JPOA that has not been addressed. Because look at the facts. Implementation of the agreement was in January, just 3 months ago, and Iran's breakout time for nuclear capability is about 12 months. Since implementation, Iran has accessed billions of dollars in sanctions relief. We've seen 3 ballistic missile tests, one in October, one in November, one in March, and one launched not far from U.S. naval vessels. We've seen American sailors humiliated and detained at gunpoint. We've seen 4 innocent American hostages traded for the freedom of 21 Iranian criminals, the release of 7 terrorists, and clemency for 14 more. We've seen $1.7 billion in American taxpayer money go to the government of Iran for defense contractor services plus interest paid but not performed back in 1979, and it was so quickly paid that no victim of terrorism who has a judgment in the United States could attach the money. And yet Iran continues to support a Houthi insurgency that toppled the legitimate government of Yemen. It supports Shia militias in Iraq that virtually control the democratically elected Iraqi government, threatening to return Iraq to civil war or worse. It supports Assad in Syria and continues to send millions of dollars in sophisticated weapons to Hezbollah and Hamas, threatening Israel's security. And it continues human rights violations and sustains an aging clergy that is losing touch with the hopes and dreams of young Iranians and moderates, and out-of-touch clergy that dominates the power structures and the security apparatus that restricts civil liberties and promotes its hegemonic regional destabilization. It has the largest inventory of ballistic missiles in the Middle East, capable of delivering weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons, biological weapons, and continues to develop cyber war capabilities. Iran continues its development of space launch vehicles that can lead to longer-range missile capability. It has cooperated with North Korea on the transfer of ballistic missile technology. And despite Iran's blatant adventurism, our only response has been to impose some limited sanctions on individuals, not as robust as the sanctions I had proposed when Iran began testing intercontinental ballistic missiles, which is in violation of the United Nations Security Council resolutions. Clearly, Iran will never change. The devil you see now is the devil you've always known. There has been no change, not in my experience, and I expect not in my lifetime. For all of these reasons, I am introducing legislation that fills the empty space left by the JPOA, that lets Iran continue its hegemonic behavior and leaves it unencumbered, emboldened, and enriched. When you go to the Hill, tell them you want a bill that will go a long way to preventing Iran from continuing to build up its conventional forces, fund its terrorist proxies, and make it more difficult for Iran to find new and clever ways to cheat on the agreement it signed and find its way to a nuclear weapon. Elliot Abrams once said, in Arab capitals, the failure of the United States to stop Iran's nuclear program is understood as American weakness in the struggle for dominance in the Middle East. Well, together, we can exhibit strength, not weakness, resolve, not equivocation, and most importantly, unlike some presidential candidates, I do not believe the United States can be neutral if Israel is to survive. I certainly have no intention of being neutral along those days. So let's be clear. The JCPOA, in my view, has freed Iran to test the limits of the administration's blind commitment to legacy. But my friends, legacy is not a policy, and hope is not a national security strategy, and there is too much at stake to confuse the two. We need to send a clear message to Arab capitals that at the end of the day, we will protect Israel and stop Iran from threatening its neighbors. We will focus on non-military methods to target Iranian support for terrorism and the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. We will limit the authority of any president to lift sanctions on Iranian financial institutions that have been designated as supporting terrorism. We will set clear terms for when, how, and if sanctions are lifted. We will require the president to certify to Congress that any financial institution designated for sanctions has met certain criteria before we remove those sanctions. The only thing we've done to date is impose some sanctions against 11 entities that act as front companies for Iran's ballistic missile procurement work. Wouldn't it make more sense to sanction the banks that help finance the ballistic missile program rather than to play whack-a-mole with 11 front guys? We will provide leverage to seek necessary changes in the conduct of the Iranian regime and hold Iran accountable for meeting its international obligations, including the terms of the JPOA. And we will improve the deplorable human rights situation in Iran and double down on our reassurances to Israel and American allies in the region of our full commitment to regional security. The fact is, there's much that we can do together to ensure a bright future undimmed by a nuclear cloud. We must authorize the Iran Sanctions Act that I authored. As flawed as the agreement was, the Iranians will know of consequences of any breach, and we will deal with missile proliferation, terrorism, and regional destabilization that are just as dangerous and just as threatening to American security and to Israel. I urge you to go to the House and Senate offices and urge them to support such legislation. Now, we hope and pray for peace, but we must always have Israel's back. And having Israel's back means fighting back against efforts by any nation or any anti-Semitic terrorist group, any haters or Holocaust deniers who try to delegitimize Israel. As I have said here and in other places across this nation and in the world, on many times and many occasions, and I will say again, the Holocaust was the most sinister possible reminder that the Jewish people in exile lived in constant jeopardy. But while the Shoah is central to Israel's identity, it was never the reason behind its founding, and it is not the main justification for Israel's existence today. The true justification is written in thousands of years of undeniable history that led to an undeniable conclusion. The reestablishment of the Jewish state of Israel in modern times is a result of a political reality that has grown from strong, deep roots going back to the time of Abraham and Sarah. There can be no denying the history or the courage of the Jewish people. And I know there can be no denying the Jewish people their legitimate right to live in peace and security in a homeland to which they have a connection for thousands of years. That is why you are here in Washington. And it is why, so long as I have a voice and a vote, I will not yield to those who wish to break my resolve on stopping Iran's illicit nuclear program and on preserving the unshakable bond between Israel and the United States. Passover begins on Friday, April 22nd. It celebrates freedom, liberation, and it's kept in remembrance of God passing over the houses of the Israelites, fleeing from their bondage and being freed of it. It is in commemoration of deliverance from oppression, deliverance from the threat of evil. As we approach the Easter holiday in the Christian faith and the Jewish holiday of Passover, let us be united against anyone who would threaten us, anyone who would jeopardize our children's future and what we have over the centuries built as a civilization. Let us remember Exodus 23. Thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil, neither shalt thou bear witness in a cause to turn aside after a multitude to prevent justice. As we celebrate two important holidays of our faiths, we pray that in this festive season, we have the courage to stand up even when there is pressure to stand down. In closing, I'm reminded of two stories that I hope my colleagues in Congress will take to heart. The one is the reprehensible plea Adolf Eichmann made to spare his life. In a letter to the then president of Israel, Yitzhak Ben-Zvi, he wrote, "There is a need to draw a line between the leaders responsible and the people like me forced to serve as mere instruments in the hands of the leaders." We can never allow ourselves to be instruments of anything or anyone other than our own conscience. Rather, we should be like U.S. Master Sergeant Roddy Edmonds, who, when his Nazi captor pointing a pistol at him and demanding to know which of his fellow prisoners in Ziegenhain Stalag were Jewish, ordered more than 1,000 of his fellow soldiers who were prisoners to stand in front of the barracks. And then Sergeant Edmonds said, "We are all Jews here." The act of defiance in January of 1945 spared the lives of as many as 200 Jews in his command. And so I say today, in these times, we are all Jews. Shalom.